Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the blood-soaked halls of Imperial Japan, where tea ceremonies hide deadly secrets and silk kimonos conceal poisoned daggers. Drop your city and local time in the comments. It's fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe light some incense for that gentle glow, and let's walk together into the ruthless world of Empress Wu's Japanese counterpart. You wake up in the imperial palace of 8th century Japan. The morning mist clings to the wooden corridors like ghostly fingers, and the soft patter of rain on bamboo creates a rhythm that should be peaceful. It isn't. You're about to witness how a single cup of tea can topple an empire. Your name is Tachibana no Moro, and you've just been summoned to attend the Empress. The wooden floors creak beneath your silk slippers as you navigate corridors that smell of sandalwood and something else, something metallic that makes your stomach clench. The servants bow deeper than usual, their eyes avoiding yours. They know something you don't, and their silence tastes like fear. The Empress sits in her private chamber, surrounded by delicate porcelain and deadly intentions. Her face is painted white as bone, lips crimson as fresh blood, and her smile could freeze a summer day. She's not just beautiful, she's beautiful like a spider's web is beautiful, intricate and lethal. In her hands, she holds a teacup that will change the course of Japanese history. Listen to the gentle steam rising from the teapot, that soft whisper that sounds almost like a sigh. The Empress pours with movements so graceful they seem choreographed, each gesture calculated to perfection. But you notice her fingernails. They're stained a peculiar shade of green beneath the lacquer. That's not from gardening. "Please, sit," she says, and her voice carries the authority of someone who's never been told no. You kneel on the tatami mat, the woven grass cool against your legs. The tea service before you is exquisite, hand-painted ceramics worth more than most families see in a lifetime. The irony isn't lost on you. You're about to be murdered with objects more valuable than human life. The first sip burns, but not from heat. There's a bitterness underneath the delicate green tea flavour, something that tastes like almonds and a regret. Your throat begins to tighten, not from emotion, but from the ricin slowly working its way through your bloodstream. Congratulations, you've just experienced medieval Japan's most refined assassination method. But here's what makes this particular poisoning historically significant. You're not just any court official, you're the brother of the previous emperor's most trusted advisor, and your death will clear the path for the Empress to eliminate the entire opposing faction. 1 cup of tea, 17 political rivals removed, and an empire reshaped. She's not just murdering you, she's rewriting the future with your corpse as the wall. First sentence. The room begins to blur at the edges, like watercolours bleeding into each other. Your hands shake as you try to set down the cup, but your fingers no longer obey your brain. The Empress watches with the detached interest of someone observing an ant drown in honey. Beautiful, tragic, and utterly without moment or mercy. Your last coherent thought is wondering how many others have sat in this exact spot sipping their final moments from these same cups. The answer would terrify you if you had the energy left for terror. Instead, you simply close your eyes as the gentle sound of rain continues its endless rhythm against the palace walls. The Empress already has 17 more invitations prepared for tomorrow's tea ceremony. You're dead, but your story is just beginning. 3 hours later, your body is discovered by a servant who screams loud enough to wake the ancestors. But here's the twisted genius of our Empress. She's already seated in the main hall, publicly grieving your sudden and mysterious death. Tears that could win awards stream down her painted cheeks as she demands a full investigation into this terrible tragedy. The imperial physician arrives, an elderly man whose hands shake from decades of keeping dangerous secrets. He examines your corpse with the thoroughness of someone who knows exactly what he's looking for and precisely what he must not find. Your skin has the telltale pallor of alkaloid poisoning, your fingernails blue as winter sky. But his official diagnosis will be sudden heart failure brought on by the stress of court life. Listen to the whispered conversations echoing through the palace corridors, hushed voices carrying rumours like smoke. The servants speak in fragments. Another sudden death. The 3rd this month. The Empress seems so distressed. They have learned that curiosity in this palace has a shorter life expectancy than mayflies, but you need to understand who you're dealing with. This isn't some desperate concubine clawing her way to power. This is Tachibana no Michio, born into minor nobility but blessed with the kind of intellect that could calculate the trajectory of falling kingdoms. At 16, she married into the imperial family. At 20, she was widowed under suspicious circumstances. At 25, she became regent for her infant stepson. At 30, she quietly arranged for that stepson to choke on a fishbone during dinner. Her rise to power reads like a tutorial on medieval political survival. Every death appears natural, every coincidence perfectly timed, every witness either bought, terrified, or mysteriously absent. She's not just poisoning people, she's poisoning the entire concept of opposition to her rule. The genius lies in her method selection. Poison allows for plausible deniability in ways that swords and arrows simply can't match. When someone dies from a blade, you look for enemies. When someone dies from mysterious illness, you pray to the gods and move on. She's weaponized the randomness of medieval mortality, hiding her murders in plain sight among the countless natural deaths that plague 8th century Japan. Your death serves multiple purposes beyond simple elimination. It sends a message to other potential rivals. Even high-ranking court officials aren't safe. It demonstrates her reach. She can kill you in the most sacred of settings, the tea ceremony itself, and it establishes her emotional credibility. Who could suspect someone who grieves so beautifully for each victim? But the most chilling aspect isn't the poisoning itself, it's the patience. She's been planning your death for 18 months, slowly building the circumstances that made your murder not just possible, but inevitable. She studied your habits, your favourite teas, your schedule, even your bowel movements. When you die on schedule exactly as predicted, it's not not luck, it's artistry. The Empress has already ordered your favourite tea service to be destroyed in your honour, a touching gesture that also happens to eliminate the physical evidence. The remaining poison will be carefully disposed of, the tea leaves burned, the ceramics smashed and buried. Within a week, there will be no trace of the murder weapon except in her perfectly organised memory. Tomorrow morning she'll host another tea ceremony. 16 more cups will be prepared, each one a potential death sentence waiting for the wrong person to sit in the wrong place at the wrong time. The morning after your murder, the palace operates with the efficiency of a well-oiled death machine. Servants scrub blood that isn't there from floors that were never stained, while the Empress receives condolence visitors with the grace of someone genuinely devastated by loss. Each tear is calculated, each sob timed for maximum emotional impact. You're watching this performance from the perspective of the dead, seeing how masterfully she manipulates grief as a weapon. When Lord Fujiwara arrives to pay his respects, she collapses into his arms with such convincing anguish that he immediately offers to help investigate your death. Perfect. Now she has the head of the rival faction actively participating in covering up his own future murder. The investigation, such as it is, unfolds exactly as orchestrated. The Imperial physician presents his findings, a tragic but natural death, perhaps brought on by the strain of recent political tensions. The Empress nods sadly, commenting that you had seemed unusually tired lately. Several servants, properly coached, confirm that you'd been complaining of chest pains for weeks. Listen to the sound of ink brushes scratching across paper as the official death certificate is prepared. Each character drawn seals your fate in history, not as a murder victim, but as another casualty of court stress. Your family will receive this document along with a generous pension from the Empress's personal funds, a gesture so kind it virtually guarantees their silence. But here's where the Empress reveals her true genius. She doesn't just kill her enemies, she inherits their power. Your death creates a vacant position in the Imperial Council, which she fills with her own candidate. Your assets, held in trust for your infant son, become subject to her guardianship. Your political connections, your marriage alliances, your clan loyalties, all of it transfers to her through the simple expedient of your absence. She's not committing random murders, she's performing surgical removals of specific obstacles to absolute power. Each death strengthens her position exponentially, like a chess player who wins by eliminating pieces rather than capturing territory. Your corpse is just the first domino in a sequence that will topple the entire existing power structure. The funeral preparations begin immediately, another masterpiece of political theatre. The Empress personally selects your burial robes, choosing colours that symbolise honour and loyalty to the imperial family. She composes a poem in your memory that will be carved into your memorial stone. Beautiful verses that praise your service while subtly implying that your death was a release from the burdens of this world. 3 days later, she attends your funeral in robes of deepest mourning, her painted face a mask of inconsolable sorrow. She places the first handful of earth on your coffin with hands that shake from emotion so genuine that even your widow is moved to comfort her. The same hands that measured the precise amount of ricin needed to stop your heart now tremble with what appears to be grief. But as the ceremonial drums beat their final rhythm and your body disappears forever beneath the earth, the Empress is already mentally reviewing her list. 16 names remain, each one representing another obstacle to be removed, another death to be orchestrated, another funeral to attend with perfect devastating sorrow. Your murder was just the opening move in a game that will reshape an empire. The next tea ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, and the invitations have already been sent. The Empress chose honour over mercy. Would you have made the same choice? Or would you have found another way to claim absolute power in medieval Japan? You're standing in the palace gardens 3 weeks after the first murder, watching the Empress practice calligraphy with the same precision she uses to measure poison. Her brush moves across rice paper in elegant strokes, each character perfectly formed, each line a masterpiece of controlled beauty. The irony isn't lost on you. She's writing poems about eternal peace, while orchestrating the systematic elimination of everyone who might threaten her throne. The morning sun filters through cherry blossoms, casting delicate shadows across her writing desk. Listen to the gentle scrape of brush against paper, that soft whisper of ink flowing into permanence. She's composing verses for tomorrow's court, gathering, where 3 more of her targets will be honoured guests at what they believe is a celebration of spring's arrival. But you need to understand the psychology behind her methods. This isn't random violence, it's surgical precision wrapped in silken ceremony. She's studied each victim for months, learning their habits, their fears, their weaknesses. Lord Yamamoto, her next target, has a particular fondness for imported Chinese wine. She's already arranged for a special vintage to be delivered to his chambers tonight, aged in barrels treated with mercury compounds that will give him the appearance of a stroke by morning. Her servants move around the garden like ghosts, their movements so quiet you can hear individual dewdrops falling from the bamboo leaves. They've been trained not just in service but in seance. Each one has witnessed at least one murder, and their continued breathing depends on their continued discretion. The palace operates on a currency of fear so perfectly balanced that it feels like reverence. The genius of her system lies in its self-perpetuating nature. Each successful murder makes the next one easier, not harder. Survivors become more compliant, more eager to please, more willing to look the other way when their colleagues start showing symptoms of mysterious illnesses. She's not just killing individuals, she's murdering the concept of resistance itself. You watch her pause in her writing, a small smile playing at the corners of her painted lips. She's just remembered something amusing, perhaps the way Lord Tachibana clutched his throat during those final moments, or how beautifully his widow performed her grief at the funeral. These memories bring her genuine joy, the same satisfaction of a poet might feel when crafting the perfect verse. The brush continues its dance across the paper, leaving behind characters that speak of harmony and natural order. The poem she's writing will be carved into stone and displayed in the palace courtyard, a permanent monument to her public virtue. Future generations will read these words and admire the philosophical depth of an empress who understood the delicate balance between life and death. But the most chilling aspect of watching her work is the absolute calm in her movements. There's no tremor in her hand, no hesitation in her strokes, no sign that she's planning multiple murders while composing poetry about peace. Her compartmentalization is so complete that she genuinely experiences both emotions simultaneously, the aesthetic pleasure of creating beauty and the tactical satisfaction of planning death. A butterfly lands on her writing desk. Its wings a brilliant orange that matches the autumn leaves she's describing in her poem. She pauses to watch it, her expression softening with what appears to be genuine wonder at nature's beauty. For a moment you glimpse the person she might have been in a different world, one where power didn't require corpses as stepping stones. The butterfly takes flight, and her expression returns to its usual mask of serene calculation. She dips her brush in fresh ink and continues writing, the characters flowing like water, like blood, like the tears her victims' families will shed tomorrow when they discover another tragic loss. Her poem is nearly complete, just like her plan for tonight's wine delivery. The wine arrives at Lord Yamamoto's chambers precisely at sunset, carried by a servant whose hands shake just enough to suggest nervousness, but not enough to spill the precious cargo. You're watching from the shadows as history unfolds in slow motion, each moment carefully orchestrated by an empress who treats murder like performance art. Lord Yamamoto receives the gift with the delight of a man who has no idea he's holding his own death warrant. The bottle is exquisite. Dark glass wrapped in silk, sealed with wax that bears the imperial chrysanthemum. The accompanying note, written in the Empress's elegant hand, speaks of gratitude for his loyal service and wishes for his continued health. The irony tastes like copper pennies and broken promises. Listen to the soft pop as he breaks the wax seal, that gentle release of pressure that mirrors the way life will leave his body in approximately 4 hours. The wine pours like liquid ruby, each drop containing just enough mercury to ensure his nervous system begins shutting down before he finishes his second cup. She's calculated the dosage with the precision of a master chemist, ensuring his death appears natural while guaranteeing its inevitability. But here's what makes this particular assassination historically significant. Lord Yamamoto isn't just another political rival. He's the keeper of the imperial treasury, the one man who knows exactly how much wealth the previous emperor left behind and where it's hidden. His death will allow the Empress to claim that vast fortune has been mysteriously depleted, justifying new taxes and consolidating financial control under her direct supervision. The first sip brings a smile to his weathered face. The wine is exceptional, smooth and complex with notes of cherry and something he can't quite identify. That something is his doom. But ignorance allows him to savour the flavour without recognising the metallic undertones that herald neurological damage. He pours a larger glass, settling into his favourite chair to properly appreciate this unexpected gift. You can see the mercury beginning its work within the hour. His handwriting, usually precise, starts to develop a subtle tremor as he composes his evening correspondence. The letters seem to dance slightly on the page, and he blinks repeatedly, assuming his eyes are simply tired from a long day of reviewing financial documents. He has no way of knowing that his optic nerves are being systematically destroyed by heavy metal poisoning. The servant who delivered the wine has already disappeared into the maze of palace corridors, his mission complete. By tomorrow morning, he'll be on a boat headed for distant provinces, carrying a generous payment and explicit instructions never to return to the capital. The Empress understands that live witnesses are future problems, but dead servants create immediate suspicion. Exile serves her purposes better than murder, at least in this case. As the evening progresses, Lord Yamamoto's coordination begins to deteriorate. He knocks over his inkwell while reaching for his seal, cursing his clumsiness and attributing it to age catching up with him. The spilled ink spreads across his desk like a black omen, staining financial records that will soon become evidence of his supposed mismanagement of imperial funds. By midnight, he's experiencing difficulty walking, his legs unsteady beneath him as he prepares for bed. He assumes the wine was stronger than expected, never suspecting that his nervous system is systematically failing as mercury accumulates in his brain tissue. His servant helps him into his sleeping robes, noting with concern how his master's hands shake uncontrollably. The final stage begins near dawn. Convulsions rack his body as his brain struggles to function with damaged neurons. To any observer, it appears to be a stroke, sudden, tragic, but entirely natural for a man of his age and responsibilities. The palace physician, when summoned, will find all the classic symptoms of cerebral hemorrhage, with none of the telltale signs of poisoning. By sunrise, Lord Yamamoto is dead, and the imperial treasury is effectively under the Empress's complete control. The discovery of Lord Yamamoto's body at dawn triggers the same perfectly choreographed response you witnessed 3 weeks ago. Servants scream, guards rush about with purposeful confusion, and the Empress arrives in her sleeping robes, her face a masterpiece of shocked grief. She cradles his lifeless hand while tears stream down her unpainted cheeks, the picture of a ruler devastated by the loss of a trusted advisor. But you're watching her performance with the knowledge of what really happened. Every sob is calculated, every gesture rehearsed, every tear shared at precisely the right moment for maximum emotional impact. She's not just mourning a death, she's directing a play where she's simultaneously the lead actress and the person who wrote the ending in Poison. The Imperial physician arrives within minutes, his examination thorough but predetermined. He finds evidence of stroke, the dilated pupils, the facial asymmetry, the characteristic positioning of the limbs. His official pronouncement satisfies everyone present, while protecting the one person who could contradict it. After all, he was the same physician who diagnosed Lord Tachibana's heart failure, and his continued employment depends on his continued blindness to certain medical realities. Listen to the whispered conversations that ripple through the palace corridors like water through rice paddies. The servants speak of bad omens, of too many sudden deaths, of fears that perhaps the gods are displeased with recent changes in imperial policy. Their superstitions serve the Empress perfectly. When people blame supernatural forces, they don't look for human culprits. The Treasury investigation begins immediately, and this is where her true genius reveals itself. The financial records Lord Yamamoto so carefully maintained show a disturbing pattern of expenditures that don't align with imperial receipts. Gold reserves that should contain thousands of coins now hold hundreds. Trade agreements that should have generated substantial revenue appear to have been negotiated at a loss. The evidence suggests either massive theft or catastrophic mismanagement. Of course, the Empress herself has been carefully creating this evidence for months. False documents inserted into official files, legitimate receipts destroyed and replaced with forgeries, entire transactions fabricated to suggest corruption where none existed. Lord Yamamoto's death simply prevents him from defending himself against accusations he never saw coming. She announces the Treasury crisis with the heavy heart of a ruler forced to confront uncomfortable truths about a trusted advisor. Standing before the assembled court, she speaks of betrayal more painful than any physical wound, of the difficulty of accepting that someone so close could have violated their sacred trust. Her voice breaks as she describes the enormous financial damage that must now be repaired through increased taxation and reduced court expenses. The court receives this news with the stunned silence of people watching their world reshape itself in real time. Lords who yesterday felt secure in their positions now understand that their wealth, their lands, their very lives depend entirely on the Empress's continued favour. She's not just stolen a treasury, she's purchased absolute loyalty with the currency of fear. But the most brilliant aspect of this particular murder is how it creates its own justification. Lord Yamamoto's death allows the Empress to claim financial crisis, which justifies the emergency powers she'll assume to address it. These emergency powers will include the authority to seize assets from any noble family suspected of complicity in the treasury theft. Within months, she'll have legal justification for confiscating the wealth of anyone who might fund opposition to her rule. The funeral arrangements begin immediately, another opportunity for the Empress to demonstrate her magnificent capacity for public grief. She personally selects the burial goods that will accompany Lord Yamamoto into the afterlife. Ironically, many of them purchased with the very treasury fund she claims he stole. 2 down, 15 to go. The wine merchant who supplied the mercury-treated vintage has already succumbed to a sudden illness, ensuring that particular supply chain will never be traced back to its ultimate customer. You're walking through the Palace Silk Workshop 6 weeks after Lord Yamamoto's convenient stroke, where the air smells of expensive dyes and impending doom. The Empress stands among bolts of fabric that cost more than entire villages, selecting materials for the upcoming harvest festival. Each silk thread represents wealth extracted from peasants who'll never see such luxury, and each colour choice she makes will determine who lives or dies in the coming celebration. The workshop buzzes with activity as seamstresses create costumes for court officials who don't yet realise they're sewing their own funeral shrouds. Listen to the gentle whisper of silk against silk, that soft rustling that sounds almost like prayer, but carries the weight of calculated murder. The Empress runs her fingers along a bolt of midnight blue fabric, feeling its texture while mentally reviewing which of her targets will look most elegant wearing it to their final court appearance. Her method for the harvest festival is particularly ingenious, mass poisoning disguised as food contamination. She's arranged for 17 specific dishes to be prepared with ingredients that have been carefully treated with various toxins. The beauty of this approach lies in its apparent randomness. When multiple people die from what appears to be spoiled food, investigations focus on kitchen hygiene rather than imperial assassination plots. But you need to understand the precision involved in her planning. Each poisoned dish is designed for specific dietary preferences and social protocols. Lord Ashikaga always requests the grilled fish course. His portion will contain tetrodotoxin, extracted from carefully prepared fugu organs. Lady Minamoto never touches meat but loves sweet bean pastries. Hers will feature amanita mushroom powder mixed into the red bean paste with a delicacy that would impress master chefs. The dye vats around the workshop bubble with colours that mirror the symptoms her victims will experience. The deep red of cinnabar-based pigments matches the flush that accompanies mercury poisoning. The pale green of copper-based dyes resembles the pallor of arsenic exposure. She's literally surrounding herself with the rainbow of death while maintaining the facade of preparing for celebration. Her seamstresses work with the dedication of artists, each stitch perfect, each garment a masterpiece. They have no idea they're creating costumes for the most elaborate murder scene in Japanese history. The Empress provides detailed instructions for each outfit. This collar must be loose enough to display convulsions clearly, that sleeve cut wide enough to accommodate the tremors that will accompany nervous system failure. The festival preparations have been months in the making, each detail coordinated with the efficiency of a military campaign. The seating arrangements ensure that her targets will be positioned where their deaths can be clearly observed by the maximum number of witnesses. The entertainment schedule provides natural breaks during which bodies can be discovered and removed without disrupting the overall flow of festivities. You watch her select a particularly exquisite piece of gold brocade, holding it up to the light where it shimmers like captured sunbeams. This fabric will become a ceremonial robe for the head priest who's been asking uncomfortable questions about recent deaths in the imperial court. His blessing of the harvest feast will be his final official act, as his portion of the ceremonial rice wine contains enough belladonna to stop his heart during the closing prayers. The workshop cats wind between her legs as she moves from station to station, their purring a counterpoint to the clicking of sewing needles and the soft murmur of workers' voices. Even these animals serve her purposes. Their presence in the food preparation areas will provide a convenient explanation for contamination when investigators later try to determine how so many dishes became simultaneously poisoned. The silk she's chosen tells a story of autumn abundance and natural cycles, themes that will prove grimly prophetic when applied to the life cycles she's planning to terminate. The festival garments will be beautiful enough to distract from the horror of watching 17 people die in elaborate synchronized agony. The harvest moon rises tonight, and tomorrow the feast begins. The harvest festival dawns with the kind of perfect weather that makes you believe the gods approve of whatever's about to happen. Golden sunlight streams through the palace courtyards where servants arrange tables laden with food that looks like artwork and tastes like death. You're positioned among the early arriving guests, watching the Empress perform her final preparations with the calm efficiency of someone organising a tea ceremony rather than mass murder. She moves through the great hall like a graceful spectre, adjusting flower arrangements that will soon be splattered with blood as straightening silk banners that will frame the convulsions of dying nobles. Her kimono today is particularly magnificent, deep purple silk with golden cranes embroidered across the sleeves, a pattern that symbolises longevity and good fortune. The irony burns like acid in your throat. Listen to the gentle chiming of wind bells as the first guests arrive, their laughter and conversation creating a festive atmosphere that will soon transform into screams and chaos. Each arriving noble bows deeply to the Empress, thanking her for the honour of attending such an elaborate celebration. They have no idea they're expressing gratitude for their own execution invitations. The seating arrangement is a masterpiece of strategic positioning. Her 17 targets are scattered throughout the hall, placed at different tables to avoid obvious patterns while ensuring each has easy access to their specially prepared death dishes. Lord Ashikaga sits near the eastern wall where his fish will be served first. Lady Minamoto occupies a place of honour close to the Empress herself, a position that will allow for intimate observation of her mushroom-induced seizures. The first course arrives with ceremony befitting an imperial banquet. Servants in matching silk uniforms carry lacquered trays containing delicacies that represent months of preparation and centuries of culinary tradition. The presentation is flawless, each dish a work of art that happens to contain enough poison to fell a horse. The Empress watches with satisfaction as her guests sample foods that taste like paradise but deliver the experience of hell. You can see the first symptom beginning within 30 minutes. Lord Tanaka's hand develops a slight tremor as he reaches for his wine cup. the tetrodotoxin from his specially prepared octopus beginning its work on his nervous system. He attributes the shaking to excitement and drinks more wine to steady himself, unknowingly accelerating the poison's absorption into his bloodstream. The Empress maintains perfect composure as she observes the early stages of her orchestrated massacre. She participates in conversations about literature and philosophy, while mentally tracking the progression of various toxins through the systems of her unsuspecting victims. Her ability to discuss poetry while watching people die slowly demonstrates a level of compartmentalization that borders on the supernatural. Lady Kawara begins experiencing nausea during the second course, politely excusing herself from conversation as the arsenic in her soup begins irritating her digestive tract. She assumes she ate too quickly and tries to settle her stomach with tea, never suspecting that her discomfort signals the beginning of a death that will unfold over the next several hours with textbook precision. The festival entertainment begins right on schedule, traditional dancers performing ancient stories of transformation and renewal. The symbolism is perfect as the audience is indeed undergoing transformation from living beings to corpses, though the renewal part applies only to the Empress's absolute power. The dancers' flowing movements mirror the graceful way poison moves through human anatomy, both beautiful and ultimately destructive. By the third course, multiple guests are displaying symptoms subtle enough to be dismissed as minor in disposition, but obvious enough to someone who knows what to look for. The Empress knows exactly what to look for. She's studied the effects of each poison so thoroughly that she can predict the timeline of symptoms with the accuracy of a clock marking hours until death. The beauty of her mass poisoning lies in its apparent naturalness. Food poisoning was common enough in medieval Japan that multiple simultaneous cases wouldn't immediately suggest deliberate murder. The investigation will focus on kitchen sanitation and supply chain contamination, rather than the elegant woman in purple silk who's orchestrating every detail of the unfolding tragedy. The festival reaches its deadly crescendo during the fourth course as symptoms escalate from uncomfortable to alarming across multiple tables. You watch the Empress maintain her serene composure while 17 different poisons perform their lethal choreography throughout the Great Hall. Her ability to appear concerned while feeling triumphant represents the pinnacle of Imperial Deception. Lord Ashikaga suddenly clutches his chest, his face contorting with pain as the tetrodotoxin reaches his heart muscle. The paralysis spreads through his body with mechanical precision, his limbs becoming increasingly unresponsive, while his mind remains terrifyingly clear. He tries to speak but can only produce strangled sounds that the other guests mistake for choking on food. Several people rush to help him, not realizing they're attempting to save a man whose nervous system is systematically shutting down. Listen to the growing chorus of distress as more victims enter critical phases of poisoning. Lady Minamoto doubles over with violent stomach cramps as the amanita mushroom toxins begin destroying her liver cells. The sweet bean pastries she praised just an hour ago now feel like molten metal in her digestive tract. Her pale silk kimono darkens with perspiration as her body fights a battle it cannot win. The Empress rises from her seat with graceful urgency, calling for physicians, while her eyes shine with satisfaction she carefully masks as concern. Her performance is flawless. She appears to be a devoted ruler watching her beloved subjects succumb to a tragic accident, when in reality she's a conductor watching her symphony of death reach its climactic movement. The palace physicians rush between victims with the frantic energy of people who understand they're witnessing something unprecedented. Dr. Yamada examines Lord Ashikaga's dilated pupils and erratic pulse, his trained mind recognizing symptoms that don't align with simple food poisoning. But years of avoiding dangerous questions have conditioned him to find acceptable explanations rather than accurate ones. He declares it a severe allergic reaction and continues to the next victim. 3 guests collapse simultaneously during the 5th course, their bodies finally unable to maintain the pretense of normal function. Lady Kawara falls face first into her soup bowl. The arsenic having progressed to full systemic failure, Lord Hayashi tumbles from his cushion as strychnine-induced convulsions rack his frame with violent spasms. The festival atmosphere transforms into chaos as servants scream and remaining guests flee from what appears to be cursed food, but the Empress remains steady in the storm of panic she created. She coordinates the evacuation of healthy guests while ensuring that medical attention reaches her victims at precisely the right moment, late enough to be useless for saving lives, but timely enough to document the apparent naturalness of their deaths. Her crisis management skills would be admirable if they weren't being used to cover up mass murder. The death toll mounts with mathematical precision. Each poison completes its work according to the timeline she memorized during months of preparation. Lord Tanaka expires exactly when the tetrodotoxin should have stopped his respiratory function. Lady Minamoto's liver failure occurs precisely when amanita toxins should have overwhelmed her body's detoxification capabilities. The accuracy of these deaths would be suspicious if anyone were in a position to notice the patterns. The hall empties as surviving guests flee in terror, leaving behind 17 corpses arranged among the remnants of what was supposed to be a celebration. The Empress stands alone among the carnage, surveying her work with the satisfaction of an artist whose masterpiece has exceeded expectations. The wind bells continue their gentle chiming, now a funeral dirge for the political opposition that no longer exists. Emergency investigators arrive within hours to examine what appears to be the worst case of food poisoning in Imperial history. They find evidence of contaminated ingredients, improper storage, and kitchen negligence. Exactly the evidence the Empress has been carefully planting for weeks. The head cook, already dead from a sudden heart attack that morning, makes a convenient scapegoat for the tragedy. By sunset, the Harvest Festival massacre is being recorded as a terrible accident that claimed 17 lives due to kitchen mismanagement. The Empress addresses the nation with tears streaming down her painted face, promising reforms to prevent such tragedies while privately celebrating the most successful single day of her reign. The only opposition to her rule now lies buried beneath 17 gravestones. Winter settles over the Imperial Palace like a shroud 3 months after the Harvest Massacre, and you find yourself in the Empress's private chambers watching her plan the systematic elimination of inconvenient widows. Snow falls silently outside paper screens, each flake a whisper of death that matches the quiet way she's about to remove the last threats to her absolute power. The brazier crackles softly, warming air that tastes of sandalwood and impending murder. 17 wives became widows during the Harvest Festival, and each one represents a potential problem. These women possess their dead husband's political knowledge, their family connections, and most dangerously, their intimate understanding of court dynamics. They've seen patterns in recent deaths that might eventually coalesce into dangerous questions. The Empress has decided that grief should be permanent rather than merely profound. Her method for this winter's work is almost artistic in its subtlety. She's going to kill them with kindness. Each widow has received an imperial invitation to join a special grief counselling circle, a support group where they can share their sorrow and receive comfort from their caring Empress. The irony would be poetic if it weren't so lethal. Listen to the soft scratch of her brush as she writes personal condolence letters to each widow, her calligraphy flowing like water across expensive paper. Each letter expresses genuine empathy for their loss, while extending invitations to private tea ceremonies where their healing can begin. The words are beautiful, the sentiment apparently sincere, and the underlying intent absolutely murderous. But you need to understand the psychological warfare behind this approach. These women are vulnerable, isolated, and desperately in need of support from someone who understands their position. The Empress is offering them exactly what they crave: understanding, companionship, and validation of their grief. She's weaponizing their human need for connection, turning their emotional vulnerability into a pathway to death. The first widow to receive special attention is Lady Ashikaga, whose husband clutched his chest and died during the festival's fourth course. She sits alone in her empty mansion, surrounded by memories and shadows, when the Imperial messenger arrives with an invitation written in the Empress's own hand. The message speaks of shared sorrow and mutual support, of finding meaning in tragedy and strength in sisterhood. Lady Ashikaga weeps with gratitude as she reads words that seem to offer exactly what her broken heart needs. She's been struggling with nightmares about her husband's final moments, replaying the scene where he gasped for air while she helplessly watched. The prospect of discussing these feelings with someone who was present, who witnessed the same tragedy, feels like the first hope she's experienced since becoming a widow. The tea ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon in the Empress's private meditation garden, a setting designed for intimate conversation and discreet poisoning. The winter garden is particularly beautiful in its dormancy, bare branches creating elegant silhouettes against grey sky, stone lanterns standing like sentinels in the snow, the overall atmosphere perfectly suited for contemplation of mortality. You watch the Empress prepare the special tea blend that will be served tomorrow, her movements precise as a surgeon's as she measures ingredients that include dried oleander petals ground to powder. The poison will be tasteless in the strong green tea, and its effects will begin hours after Lady Ashikaga returns home, ensuring that her death appears to be delayed grief response rather than murder during tea time. The beauty of oleander poisoning lies in its perfect mimicry of heart failure, particularly appropriate for a widow whose husband died from apparent cardiac arrest. Lady Ashikaga will experience chest pains, irregular heartbeat, and breathing difficulties that will seem like grief-induced stress until they become fatal. Even her physician will assume that losing her husband literally broke her heart. But the Empress's plans extend beyond simple elimination. Each widow's death will be accompanied by the discovery of letters expressing despair over their losses and their inability to continue living without their beloved husbands. These suicide notes, written in the Empress's masterful forgery of each woman's handwriting, will provide clear explanations for their deaths, while generating public sympathy for women who love too deeply to survive loss. The preparation continues through the night as snow accumulates on the meditation garden's stone paths, creating a pristine setting for tomorrow's tea-time murder. Lady Ashikaga arrives at the palace precisely on time, her black mourning robes stark against the white snow as she walks through the meditation garden toward her final tea ceremony. You watch from behind the frosted glass as she bows deeply to the Empress, gratitude radiating from every line of her posture. She's desperate for connection, for understanding, for someone to acknowledge that her pain matters in a world that's already moving past her husband's death. The setting is exquisite in its winter beauty. Stone benches cleared of snow, charcoal braziers providing warmth that creates small circles of comfort in the cold air. The tea service arranged on a low table with the precision of religious ceremony. Listen to the gentle hiss of steam rising from the iron kettle, that soft sound that usually brings peace, but today carries the promise of cardiac arrest. The Empress greets her guest with embraces that seem genuine enough to fool someone who desperately wants to believe in kindness. Her performance is masterful. She speaks of sleepless nights, haunted by the memory of watching good men die, of the responsibility she feels for failing to prevent the tragedy, of the bond that connects all who witnessed such horror. Every word is calculated to create intimacy while preparing justification for what's about to happen. Lady Ashikaga drinks in these words like someone dying of thirst. She's been isolated in her grief, surrounded by servants who don't understand her loss, and relatives who want her to move on for the sake of appearances. The Empress offers what she's been craving, acknowledgement that her pain is valid, that her husband's death matters, that her survival as a widow represents strength rather than mere stubbornness. The tea preparation ritual unfolds with meditative slowness. The Empress demonstrates perfect ceremony, each movement flowing naturally into the next as she warms the cups, measures the leaves and pours water heated to exactly the right temperature. The oleander-laced tea looks identical to the pure variety, deep green, slightly cloudy, aromatic with the grass-like scent that characterizes premium matcha. Their conversation flows as smoothly as the tea into porcelain cups. Lady Ashikaga speaks of her husband's final moments, how his eyes met hers across the festival hall, how she knew something was terribly wrong but couldn't reach him through the crowd. The Empress listens with apparent empathy, occasionally touching her guest's hand in gestures of comfort that would seem supportive if you didn't know they were performed by her husband's murderer. The first cup is consumed without incident, its bitter taste attributed to the natural intensity of ceremonial-grade tea. Lady Ashikaga actually compliments the flavour, noting how the slight bitterness seems appropriate for discussions of loss and mortality. She has no way of knowing that the bitterness comes from cardiac glycosides that are already beginning their work on her cardiovascular system. You can see the oleander's effects beginning during the second cup. A slight flush in Lady Ashikaga's cheeks, a barely perceptible change in her breathing pattern, the first subtle signs that her heart rhythm is becoming irregular. The Empress monitors these symptoms while maintaining perfect conversational flow, discussing philosophy and poetry as if unaware that her guest is entering the early stages of poisoning. The psychological torture embedded in this scene is exquisite. Lady Ashikaga is finally receiving the emotional support she's craved, feeling understood and valued for the first time since her husband's death, while her body slowly succumbs to the same type of cardiac failure that killed him. She's experiencing connection and compassion while dying, making her final moments both beautiful and horrific. The third cup seals her fate. The accumulated oleander toxins reach critical levels in her bloodstream, ensuring that her heart will begin failing within hours of returning home. The Empress suggests they conclude with a prayer for their lost loved ones, a touching gesture that allows her to observe Lady Ashikaga's increasingly laboured breathing, while appearing to share spiritual communion. As the ceremony ends, Lady Ashikaga expresses profound gratitude for the Empress's kindness and wisdom. She feels lighter than she has in months, buoyed by the understanding that her grief has purpose and meaning. She has no idea that this emotional relief will be her last positive experience before oleander poisoning transforms her final hours into cardiac agony. The Empress embraces her warmly at departure, holding her slightly longer than necessary to feel the irregular pulse that confirms successful poisoning. Tonight, Lady Ashikaga will die believing she was beloved by someone who actually murdered both her and her husband. Lady Ashikaga's death unfolds exactly as orchestrated over the following 18 hours. You follow her final journey from the palace gates to her family compound, watching oleander toxins systematically dismantle her cardiovascular system, while she experiences what she believes to be the emotional aftermath of meaningful connection. The snow continues falling, each flake a silent witness to murder, disguised as mercy. She returns home in better spirits than she's felt since the Harvest Festival, chatting animatedly with her servants about the Empress's wisdom and compassion. Her cheeks still carry the flush that she attributes to warmth from the braziers and emotional catharsis from finally being understood. The reality that her capillaries are dilating from cardiac glycoside poisoning never occurs to her as she prepares for what she assumes will be her first peaceful night's sleep in months. Listen to the gentle sounds of her evening routine: water pouring into porcelain basins, silk rustling as she changes from outdoor to indoor clothing, the soft padding of servants' feet as they prepare her chambers for rest. These ordinary domestic sounds create a peaceful backdrop for the extraordinary process of systematic cardiac failure beginning in her chest. The first serious symptoms begin around midnight. Lady Ashikaga wakes with chest pain that she initially dismisses as an emotional residue from the day's intense conversation about grief and loss. She's heard that profound discussions can trigger physical responses, so she interprets the tightness in her chest as her heart finally beginning to process suppressed sorrow rather than as the beginning of oleander-induced cardiac arrest. But the pain intensifies, spreading from her chest down her left arm in the classic pattern of myocardial distress. Her breathing becomes laboured, not from emotion, but from a heart struggling to maintain normal rhythm against the chemical assault disrupting its electrical system. She calls for her personal physician, Dr. Watanabe, who arrives to find his patient in obvious cardiovascular distress. Dr. Watanabe's examination reveals elevated pulse, irregular rhythm, and blood pressure fluctuations consistent with heart failure. His patient describes overwhelming fatigue, nausea, and chest pain that began suddenly several hours ago. Every symptom aligns perfectly with cardiac crisis brought on by extreme grief, a condition well documented in medical literature and perfectly believable for a recent widow who lost a husband to apparent heart failure. The physician prescribes rest, warm compresses, and herbal remedies designed to calm emotional distress and support cardiac function. His treatments are appropriate for grief-induced heart problems, but useless against oleander poisoning, which requires specific antidotes that won't be identified for several centuries. Lady Ashikaga follows his instructions faithfully, while the poison continues its methodical destruction of her heart muscle. By dawn, her condition has deteriorated beyond medical intervention available in 8th century Japan. Her pulse becomes thread-like and erratic, her breathing shallow and laboured, her consciousness fluctuating as her brain receives insufficient oxygenated blood. Dr. Watanabe recognizes that his patient is dying, but can only attribute her decline to the overwhelming emotionals, trauma of surviving her husband's sudden death. The end comes peacefully, which is perhaps the cruelest aspect of oleander poisoning. Lady Ashikaga simply stops breathing during what appears to be natural sleep. her heart finally succumbing to the chemical disruption that began during yesterday's compassionate tea ceremony. Her face in death wears an expression of serenity that suggests she found peace in her final hours. The investigation into her death is perfunctory. Dora Watanabe reports heart failure brought on by severe grief, a diagnosis that satisfies everyone involved while raising no uncomfortable questions about the Empress's role in providing comfort to the deceased. The suicide note discovered among Lady Ashikaga's personal effects, written in perfect forgery of her handwriting, explains her despair over surviving her beloved husband and her decision to join him in whatever afterlife awaits devoted couples. The funeral becomes a celebration of true love conquering death, with the Empress delivering a moving eulogy about the power of marital devotion and the tragic beauty of hearts that cannot survive separation. She weeps genuine tears, not from grief but from satisfaction at having orchestrated such a perfect murder while enhancing her reputation for compassion and wisdom. One widow down, 16 to go, the winter has only just begun. Spring arrives at the Imperial Palace with cherry blossoms that bloom like drops of blood against the pale sky, and you find yourself witnessing the Empress's most ambitious project yet, the systematic elimination of anyone who might remember how many people have died under suspicious circumstances. The survivor count has grown too large, the pattern of deaths too obvious to anyone paying attention. She's decided that memory itself has become her enemy and must be destroyed. You're standing in the palace archive where she reviews records of every person who has witnessed multiple mysterious deaths during her reign. Scribes, servants, guards, physicians, anyone whose job required them to be present during her various murders, now represents a potential threat. Their collective memory contains enough fragments of truth to eventually piece together her guilt, so she's planning to eliminate not just individuals, but institutional knowledge itself. Listen to the soft rustling of paper as she sorts through personnel files, each document representing a life that knows too much. Her method for this spring cleaning is elegantly simple. She's going to stage a plague outbreak that will allow her to quarantine and eliminate specific individuals while appearing to protect public health. The beauty of plague is that it kills randomly and requires isolation, providing perfect cover for targeted murder. But this isn't actual plague, of course. She's going to use a combination of theatrical symptoms and strategic poisoning to create the appearance of contagious disease while maintaining complete control over who lives and dies. The plague will affect only people whose memories pose threats to her continued reign, while mysteriously sparing everyone whose loyalty is unquestioned. Her first target is Master Kenji, the palace physician who has examined too many bodies displaying symptoms that don't quite align with official causes of death. His medical training makes him dangerous. He understands that certain combinations of symptoms suggest specific types of poisoning, rather than natural death. She's going to make him the first victim of her manufactured plague, using his medical expertise against him in a twisted demonstration of poetic justice. The preparation involves creating physical evidence of contagious disease. She's arranged for rats to be infected with actual bacterial illness, then released in specific areas of the palace to provide authentic biological traces when investigators search for the plague's source. The dead rodents will carry genuine pathogens that will test positive for plague bacteria, lending scientific credibility to her fabricated epidemic. Master Kenji receives an urgent summons to examine a servant who has developed alarming symptoms during the night. The servant, actually one of the Empress's most trusted assassins, displays a convincing array of plague-like symptoms: high fever, swollen lymph nodes, and the characteristic black patches that give bubonic plague its terrifying reputation. The symptoms are theatrical but medically accurate, crafted specifically to convince a physician of their authenticity. You watch Master Kenji's examination unfold in a chamber specifically prepared for contamination theatre. The patient writhes in apparent agony while displaying symptoms that perfectly match plague manifestations the physician has read about in ancient medical texts. Swollen buboes in the armpits and groin, fever-induced delirium, and skin discoloration that suggests systemic infection, every detail designed to trigger the doctor's professional alarm. Master Kenji's medical training compels him to diagnose what appears to be textbook plague, but his years of observing suspicious deaths in the palace make him hesitate. Something about the presentation feels orchestrated, too perfect in its symptom display, too conveniently timed after months of mounting questions about recent mortality patterns. His professional instincts war with his survival instincts as he realizes that this diagnosis will have consequences beyond medical treatment. The Empress arrives during his examination, her face masked with silk to protect against contagion, her eyes bright with what appears to be concern but registers as anticipation to anyone who knows her true nature. She observes the medical consultation with the intensity of someone whose future depends on the physician's official pronouncement of plague outbreak. Master Kenji understands that his diagnosis will determine not just treatment protocols but the scope of quarantine measures, the level of palace panic, and quite possibly his own survival. He's trapped between his medical oath to provide accurate diagnosis and his growing certainty that accuracy might prove fatal in this particular case. The moment stretches like pulled silk as he prepares to speak the words that will either confirm the Empress's plague narrative or expose his dangerous level of perception about recent palace deaths. Master Kenji's diagnosis seals not only his fate but the fate of 43 other palace residents whose memories have become inconvenient for the Empress. His professional declaration of plague outbreak triggers immediate quarantine protocols that she has carefully designed to isolate specific individuals while maintaining the appearance of random medical necessity. You watch the machinery of manufactured epidemics spring into motion with the precision of a clock mechanism designed for murder. The quarantine compound is established in the eastern wing of the palace, a section that can be sealed off from the main buildings while maintaining the appearance of medical isolation. Listen to the sound of hammers and saws as carpenters install additional barriers, their work creating what appears to be disease containment but actually functions as a prison for people who know too much about recent suspicious deaths. Within hours, the Empress has identified 44 individuals who must be quarantined due to their exposure to the infected servant. The selection appears random to casual observers, but follows her carefully prepared list of dangerous witnesses. Guards who were present during multiple mysterious deaths, servants who cleaned up after suspicious fatalities, scribes who recorded too many natural death certificates with unusual symptom patterns, all find themselves gathered for protective isolation. Master Kenji enters quarantine as both patient and physician, a dual role that allows him to observe the progression of illness among his fellow inmates, while being unable to communicate his findings to the outside world. The irony is exquisite. His medical expertise makes him the perfect witness to document how the Empress's plague differs from actual plague, but his quarantine status ensures that documentation will never reach anyone who could act on it. The first deaths in quarantine begin within days, but they don't follow plague patterns. Instead of the random mortality typical of epidemic disease, deaths cluster among individuals whose palace positions gave them access to information about previous suspicious fatalities. The head cook who prepared food during the Harvest Festival massacre dies first, followed by the guard captain who supervised security during multiple mysterious deaths. You can see Master Kenji's growing alarm as he realizes the quarantine deaths display symptoms he's never observed in authentic plague cases. The victims show signs of various poisonings, some cardiac, some neurological, some gastrointestinal, but none displaying the characteristic bubonic swelling and septicemic spread that defines genuine plague. His medical training rebels against accepting these deaths as natural epidemic mortality, but his protests fall on deaf ears because the quarantine prevents him from reaching anyone with authority to investigate his concerns. The Empress visits the isolation compound daily, her face masked against contagion, her demeanour perfectly balanced between imperial concern and medical caution. She reviews mortality reports with apparent grief while mentally checking names off her list of problematic witnesses. The plague narrative gains credibility with each death, because the outside world sees only the results, not the methods. Palace residents observe quarantine protocols with religious fervour, believing they're preventing the spread of deadly disease when they are actually facilitating systematic murder. Fear of contagion accomplishes what years of intimidation couldn't: absolute compliance with orders that separate dangerous witnesses from potential allies. Master Kenji's own death comes during the quarantine's second week, his demise carefully staged to appear consistent with plague progression, while actually resulting from a concentrated dose of aconitine introduced into his medical supplies. The poison mimics plague's final stages closely enough to satisfy outside observers, while eliminating the one person qualified to identify discrepancies between manufactured and authentic epidemic symptoms. His final medical notes, discovered after his death, describe classic plague progression with the detail expected from a physician documenting his own illness. These notes, actually written by one of the Empress's skilled forgers, provide medical evidence supporting the plague narrative, while eliminating any record of Master Kenji's actual observations about suspicious symptom patterns among his fellow quarantine victims. The quarantine continues for another month, claiming 37 more lives in total, each death carefully orchestrated to eliminate specific individuals whose memories pose threats to her continued reign. The manufactured plague provides the perfect cover for systematic murder, allowing her to target dangerous witnesses while appearing to protect public health through medical quarantine. Dr. Matsuda, the backup physician who replaced Master Kenji, arrives on the quarantine's final day to conduct post-mortem examinations that will provide official closure to the epidemic. You watch him work with the methodical precision of someone who understands that accuracy might prove fatal. He documents classic plague symptoms in victim after victim, his reports creating a medical paper trail that supports the Empress's epidemic narrative. But the most chilling aspect of the quarantine's conclusion is how perfectly it serves her political objectives. 44 dead represent the complete elimination of institutional memory regarding her murder spree. Every guard who witnessed suspicious deaths, every servant who cleaned up after mysterious fatalities, every scribe who recorded questionable natural death certificates, all now lie buried in a mass grave marked as plague victims. Listen to the sound of shovels scraping against earth as workers seal the quarantine compound's burial ground, each scoop of dirt covering evidence that will never be examined or questioned. The Empress observes the ceremony with appropriate solemnity, her silk mourning robes fluttering into the spring breeze as she delivers a moving speech about the tragic cost of epidemic disease and the importance of honouring those who died serving the imperial household. The palace emerges from quarantine cleaner than it's been in months, not from soap and water, but from the systematic removal of everyone who might have eventually connected the dots between her various murders. The new servants hired to replace the dead know nothing about previous suspicious deaths. The fresh guards have no knowledge of unusual security protocols during past mysterious fatalities. The replacement scribes possess no memory of the unusual frequency of natural death certificates issued during her reign. She's not just eliminated individuals, she's performed surgery on collective memory itself, cutting out the tumour of accumulated suspicion and replacing it with loyal, ignorant scar tissue. The plague outbreak story becomes official history, recorded in imperial annals as a tragic natural disaster that claimed 44 loyal palace servants who died serving their Empress during a time of crisis. The spring cleaning is complete. Her reign now rests on a foundation of corpses whose deaths appear entirely natural and unconnected. The survivor count has been reset to 0, and institutional knowledge of her murder methods has been buried along with her victims. Summer approaches, and with it, new opportunities for elimination. The summer heat settles over the imperial palace like a shroud 3 months after the quarantine massacre, and you find yourself in the Empress's private study watching her plan what she calls the final harvest, the elimination of the remaining obstacles to absolute power. The air shimmers with humidity that makes everything feel dreamlike, from the silk wall hangings to the meticulously arranged poison vials hidden behind innocent tea canisters. Her target list has been refined through months of careful observation and political calculation. Only 7 names remain, 3 rival court officials whose family connections make them untouchable through normal intrigue, 2 Buddhist abbots whose moral authority challenges her legitimacy, 1 elderly Empress Dowager whose memory reaches back to more peaceful times, and her own stepson, the legitimate heir whose continued existence represents the ultimate threat to her usurped throne. Listen to the gentle scratch of her brush as she composes what appears to be poetry but actually functions as encoded murder instructions. Each verse contains specific details about timing, location, and method, written in classical Chinese characters that appear to discuss seasonal changes and natural cycles. To any casual observer, she's creating literature about summer's abundance. In reality, she's choreographing 7 deaths with the precision of a master dramatist. But these final murders require more sophistication than her previous work. The remaining targets are either too well protected or too politically significant to be eliminated through simple poisoning. She needs methods that appear completely natural, timed perfectly to seem like tragic coincidences, rather than systematic assassination. Each death must look like fate intervening rather than an Empress orchestrating. Her stepson presents the greatest challenge and the highest stakes. Prince Yamato is 19 years old, beloved by the people, and possessed of enough political intelligence to eventually piece together the truth about his father's death and the subsequent carnage. His elimination must appear not just natural but inevitable, a tragic accident that removes him while generating maximum sympathy for his grieving stepmother. The plan she's devised is breathtaking in its audacity. She's going to stage a hunting accident during the autumn festival, arranging for Prince Yamato to be killed by a wild boar that has been deliberately provoked into attacking. The beauty of this method lies in its apparent randomness. Hunting accidents were common enough that no one would question the tragic loss of a young prince to the dangers of the wilderness. You watch her review detailed maps of the Imperial hunting grounds, marking the locations where previous boar attacks occurred, and calculating sightlines that will ensure the prince's death appears accidental, while providing her with perfect alibis. The preparation involves bribing hunters to alter their usual patrol routes, drugging tracking dogs to ensure they won't interfere with the attack, and secretly baiting specific areas with scents that will drive boars into aggressive frenzies. The psychological warfare embedded in her summer planning is exquisite. She's spending long hours with Prince Yamato, playing the role of loving stepmother, while subtly underaging his interest in dangerous hunting expeditions. Her conversations plant suggestions about proving his manhood through solo hunts, challenging larger prey, and demonstrating the kind of courage that befits a future emperor. Meanwhile, she continues her correspondence with the other targets, each letter seemingly innocent but actually serving to position them for elimination. The Buddhist abbots receive invitations to meditation retreats in remote mountain monasteries, where accidents can be easily arranged. The rival court officials are encouraged to undertake diplomatic missions to provinces where bandit attacks have become mysteriously frequent. The elderly Empress Dowager is being slowly poisoned with mercury compounds hidden in her cosmetics, a method so gradual that her death will appear to result from natural aging. The summer afternoon light streams through paper screens, casting shadows that dance like the spirits of her future victims. Each shadow seems to represent another life she's planning to extinguish, another obstacle to be removed from her path to absolute power. The beauty of the season contrasts sharply with the ugliness of her intentions, creating an aesthetic tension that would be poetic if it weren't so murderous. Her final preparations include arranging for new court appointments that will fill the power vacuum created by the coming deaths. Every elimination will strengthen her position exponentially, removing opposition while installing loyal supporters in positions of influence. By autumn's end, she expects to rule an empire where every significant position is held by people who owe their advancement to her largesse. The hunting festival is scheduled for next month, and Prince Yamato has already expressed enthusiasm for participating in the dangerous boar hunts that will claim his life. The autumn hunting festival dawns with mist that clings to the imperial forest like silk veils hiding deadly secrets, and you find yourself positioned among the beaters watching the Empress orchestrate her stepson's murder with the precision of a master tactician. Prince Yamato rides beside her through the golden woods, his young face bright with excitement for what he believes will be a glorious hunt. He has no idea that the boars they're tracking have been specifically baited and provoked to ensure his death appears tragically accidental. Listen to the soft thudding of horse hooves against damp earth, that rhythmic sound that usually signals adventure, but today marks the countdown to regicide. The hunting party consists of carefully selected participants, guards whose loyalty has been purchased, beaters who've been threatened into compliance, and fellow nobles who've been positioned as witnesses to what will appear to be a devastating accident. Every person present serves her purpose, whether they realize it or not. The Empress rides with perfect composure, her hunting attire immaculate silk that will show no blood spatter when positioned at the correct angle during the attack. She maintains animated conversation with Prince Yamato about hunting techniques and forest lore, her voice carrying the warmth of maternal pride while her eyes calculate distances and timing with murderous precision. She's simultaneously playing loving stepmother and cold-blooded assassin, her performance flawless enough to convince everyone present of her genuine affection for the boy she's about to have killed. But you need to understand the tactical brilliance of her setup. The hunting route has been carefully planned to pass through areas where large boars have been baited with fermenting fruit laced with stimulants that make them aggressive and unpredictable. These animals have been deprived of food for days, making them desperate enough to attack humans rather than flee. The combination of hunger, drug-induced agitation, and territorial instincts will create killing machines disguised as wildlife. The first part of the hunt proceeds normally, allowing Prince Yamato to demonstrate his archery skills on smaller game while building his confidence for the larger prey that awaits. His success with deer and wildfowl delights the Empress, who praises his marksmanship and suggests that he's ready for more challenging quarry. Her encouragement plants the seeds of overconfidence that will contribute to his downfall when faced with an impossibly dangerous situation. You can see the trap approaching as the hunting party moves deeper into the forest toward the area where the drugged boars await. The undergrowth becomes denser, the paths narrower, the escape routes more limited. The Empress suggests that Prince Yamato take the lead in tracking the large boar, whose signs they've been following, positioning him at the front of the group where he'll receive the full force of the animal's attack. The beaters begin their work, driving forest creatures toward the hunting party with carefully orchestrated noise and movement. But their real purpose is to provoke the hidden boars into defensive aggression, creating the circumstances where a massive drugged animal will encounter Prince Yamato at precisely the moment when escape becomes impossible. The timing must be perfect. Too early and the prince might retreat. Too late and other hunters might intervene. The Empress maintains her position slightly behind and to the left of her stepson, an arrangement that provides her with clear observation of the coming attack, while ensuring she'll be positioned to render aid that will arrive just moments too late. Her horse is held by a groom, whose instructions include allowing the animal to bolt at the first sign of violence, giving her the perfect excuse for being unable to immediately assist the victim. Prince Yamato raises his bow as rustling in the undergrowth signals the approach of their quarry. His posture is confident, his aim steady, his trust in his stepmother's protective presence absolute. He has no way of knowing that the massive boar crashing through the forest toward him has been specifically conditioned to associate human scent with food and territorial threat, making it far more dangerous than any natural wildlife encounter. 6. The attack begins exactly as orchestrated, with 800 pounds of drug-enraged boar exploding from the undergrowth directly toward the unsuspecting prince. The boar attack unfolds with the brutal efficiency of a choreographed execution, 800 pounds of fury and tusks launching itself at Prince Yamato with the unstoppable force of an avalanche. You watch the collision in slow motion as the young prince's confident posture transforms into desperate terror, his bow falling from nerveless fingers as razor-sharp tusks tear through silk hunting clothes and into the soft flesh beneath. The Empress observes from her carefully calculated position, her face a masterpiece of horrified concern masking triumphant satisfaction. Listen to the sounds that will haunt the surviving witnesses, the wet impact of tusk against bone, Prince Yamato's strangled scream cut short by massive jaws clamping around his throat, the snorting and grunting of an animal driven beyond normal aggression by chemical stimulation. The forest itself seems to recoil from the violence, leaves rustling and phantom wind as if nature recognizes the unnaturalness of this orchestrated slaughter. The prince's horse rears and bolts, exactly as planned, carrying away any chance of escape while providing the perfect excuse for the Empress's own mount to shy and retreat. Her performance is flawless. She appears to struggle with her terrified horse while actually positioning herself at the ideal distance to witness the murder without risking injury. Every movement suggests desperate attempts to help while ensuring she remains safely out of range. Prince Yamato fights with the courage of someone who still believes he might survive, grabbing at the boar's snout while trying to reach the hunting knife at his belt. But the animal has been conditioned through weeks of preparation to associate human struggle with the need for more aggressive attack. The drugs coursing through its system eliminate normal fear responses, turning it into a killing machine that won't retreat until its victim stops moving entirely. The other hunters react with the confusion of people witnessing something beyond their understanding. Some attempt to approach, but the boar's frenzied state makes intervention appear suicidal. Others flee in terror, their panicked retreat providing perfect alibis for their inability to assist. The few who remain watch in horrified fascination as their future emperor is torn apart by an animal that seems possessed by demons. You can see the life leaving Prince Yamato's eyes as massive blood loss overwhelms his young body's ability to function. His struggles weaken, his breathing becomes laboured, his skin takes on the pale grey colour that signals impending death. The Empress times her rescue attempt perfectly, close enough to appear devoted, late enough to be useless, dramatic enough to generate lasting sympathy for the stepmother who tried so hard to save her beloved prince. The boar finally releases its victim when arrows from the distant guards finally penetrate its drug-addled consciousness, the animal collapsing with enough stimulants in its system to kill 3 normal pigs. The creature's death ensures that no veterinary examination will reveal the chemical cocktail that turned it into a murder weapon. To any investigator, it will appear to be a rogue animal acting on natural instincts rather than artificial enhancement. Prince Yamato's final moments are spent in the Empress's arms as she cradles his broken body with convincing tenderness. Her tears are genuine, not from grief, but from relief that the greatest threat to her reign has been eliminated. She whispers words of comfort that sound like maternal love but function as victory speeches, her voice breaking with emotion that appears devastated but registers as triumphant to those who know her true nature. The hunting party's return to the palace becomes a funeral procession, with the Empress leading the way on foot beside the horse bearing her stepson's mutilated corpse. Her grief performance reaches new heights of artistic achievement as she alternates between stoic composure and heartbroken collapse, her emotional range convincing everyone present that she's lost the most precious thing in her world rather than eliminated her greatest political obstacle. The official investigation into Prince Yamato's death begins immediately, but its conclusions are predetermined by the circumstances the Empress has so carefully arranged. The physical evidence supports every aspect of her narrative. A hunting accident caused by an unusually aggressive boar, witnessed by reliable sources, impossible to prevent despite heroic efforts by his loving stepmother. The Empire mourns the loss of its future ruler, while the Empress consolidates absolute power behind a mask of devastating grief. The funeral of Prince Yamato becomes the greatest performance of the Empress's murderous career, transforming regicide into a celebration of maternal devotion that solidifies her political position while eliminating any lingering questions about the hunting accident. You watch from among the mourners as she delivers a eulogy that would move stones to tears, her voice breaking with anguish that appears genuine to everyone except those who understand she's grieving the end of opposition rather than the loss of family. The ceremony unfolds in the palace's grandest hall, draped with silk banners that cost more than most noble families possess in their lifetimes. Prince Yamato's body lies in state, wearing robes of gold brocade, his wounds artfully concealed by skilled embalmers who've transformed torn flesh into peaceful sleep. The visual impact is profound. A beautiful young man cut down in his prime, his potential destroyed by the cruel randomness of natural forces rather than the calculated malice of his stepmother. Listen to the sound of thousands of voices joined in Buddhist chants for the deceased, their unified prayer creating a wall of sound that seems to shake the palace foundations. The religious ceremony provides perfect cover for the Empress's political manoeuvring, as grief-stricken nobles approach to offer condolences while actually negotiating their positions in the power vacuum created by the prince's death. But the most brilliant aspect of her funeral performance is how she uses apparent devastation to strengthen her claim to absolute authority. Standing beside the coffin, she speaks of Prince Yamato's final words expressing his desire for her to rule in his place, ensuring the Empire's stability during this time of terrible loss. No one questions these deathbed wishes because who would doubt the testimony of a stepmother so clearly destroyed by grief? The succession announcement comes during the funeral's climax, when the Empress collapses in apparent emotional exhaustion and must be carried from the hall. Her dramatic exit prevents any immediate challenges to her claim, while generating sympathy that makes opposition seem heartlessly opportunistic. By the time she's recovered enough to hold court, her position as legitimate ruler has been accepted by a nobility too moved by her suffering to question the legal details. The political implications ripple through the empire like earthquaked tremors. Regional lords who might have supported Prince Yamato's claim now find themselves without an alternative to rally around. The Empress has eliminated not just an individual but an entire faction, leaving her opponents leaderless and demoralized. Her systematic murder campaign reaches its logical conclusion with this single death that removes all meaningful resistance to her reign. You can see her satisfaction beneath the makeup that creates artificial pallor and the carefully applied substances that redden her eyes to suggest constant weeping. Every aspect of her appearance has been designed to communicate devastating loss, while concealing triumphant victory. She's transformed from usurper to legitimate ruler through the simple expedient of murdering everyone who might dispute her authority. The investigation into the hunting accident concludes with findings that completely exonerate the Empress, while praising her heroic attempts at rescue. The official report describes her desperate efforts to reach her stepson despite personal danger, her innovative attempts at field medicine, and her heartbroken vigil beside his body until help arrived. The narrative transforms her from potential suspect into grieving victim, making any future questions about the incident appear cruel and inappropriate. The autumn festival that was supposed to celebrate the hunting season instead becomes a period of imperial mourning, with ceremonies honouring Prince Yamato's memory while subtly reinforcing the Empress's authority. She uses the extended grieving period to make administrative changes that place her supporters in key positions, justifying these appointments as necessary measures to maintain stability while she recovers from her personal tragedy. The final stage of her transformation from murderer to Empress occurs when she emerges from official mourning 3 months later, her public appearance carefully staged to suggest someone forever changed, by loss, but determined to honour her stepson's memory through devoted service to the Empire. The performance is so convincing that even her former enemies approach to pledge loyalty to a ruler who has proven her dedication through such visible suffering. Prince Yamato's death achieves everything the Empress planned and more. It eliminates the legitimate heir, consolidates her political position, generates public sympathy, and provides justification for the administrative changes that complete her coup. She's not just committed the perfect murder, she's used regicide as a stepping stone to absolute power. The Empire now belongs entirely to a woman who has killed her way to the throne, while convincing everyone she deserves it. Winter settles over the Empire like a shroud woven from silk and satisfaction, and you find yourself in the Empress's private chambers watching her review the complete list of her murder victims, while planning the final elimination of witnesses to her blood-soaked rise to power. Snow falls silently outside paper screens, each flake a whisper of death that matches the quiet way she's about to close the last chapter of her assassination campaign. The brazier crackles softly, warming air that tastes of sandalwood and ultimate triumph. She sits before a lacquered desk bearing scrolls that detail every death she's orchestrated over the past 2 years. 47 murders disguised as natural deaths, accidents, suicides, and epidemic casualties. Each name represents not just a life extinguished, but a political obstacle removed, a threat neutralized, a step closer to the absolute power she now wields without challenge. The documentation serves both as trophy collection and insurance policy, detailed records that could destroy her if discovered, but currently exist only to feed her sense of accomplishment. Listen to the soft scratch of her brush as she composes what will be her final murder orders, directing the elimination of the 3 remaining people who possess dangerous knowledge about her methods. Master Liu, the Chinese poison supplier who provided many of her weapons, has become a liability requiring permanent silence. Captain Sato, the guard who helped arrange several hunting accidents, knows too much about her tactical planning. Lady Ishikawa, her most trusted confidant, has grown increasingly uncomfortable with the scope of the carnage and might eventually develop a conscience. But these final murders require more subtlety than her previous work, because they involve people who understand her capabilities and might anticipate betrayal. Each elimination must appear completely unrelated to her, while ensuring that no evidence of their collaboration survives their deaths. The methods she's chosen reflect years of experience in making murder look like natural disaster. A tea ceremony poisoning for Master Liu, a training accident for Captain Sato, and apparent suicide for Lady Ishikawa. The genius of her winter cleaning lies in how it creates a perfect circle of death that eliminates all connections between her and the murder weapons, methods, and opportunities she's used. Master Liu's death will be attributed to drinking contaminated alcohol, removing the source of exotic poisons while appearing to result from his own carelessness. Captain Sato will die during sword practice when a deliberately weakened blade breaks and pierces his throat, eliminating the man who arranged hunting accidents through apparent equipment failure. You watch her prepare the forged suicide note that will accompany Lady Ishikawa's death, the calligraphy perfectly matching her friend's handwriting style after months of careful study and practice. The letter speaks of overwhelming guilt over unnamed sins and the inability to continue living with the burden of terrible secrets. When combined with poison that mimics the effects of guilt-induced heart failure, it will create a convincing narrative of conscience-driven self-destruction. Her private chambers have been transformed into a museum of successful murder, with shelves containing samples of every poison she's used, weapons she's deployed, and tools she's employed in her systematic campaign. These items are arranged with the care of someone who appreciates craftsmanship and takes pride in professional excellence. Each object tells a story of death disguised as natural occurrence, of victims who never suspected their fate until it was far too late to matter. The Empress reviews her victim list one final time, running her finger down names that read like a roll call of everyone who once posed any threat to her ambitions. Lords who questioned her authority, servants who witnessed suspicious deaths, physicians who might have detected poison symptoms, even family members whose existence challenged her legitimacy, all now permanently silenced through methods so sophisticated that their murders remain undetected and unsuspected. But the most chilling aspect of her winter preparations is how completely she's eliminated not just individuals, but entire networks of knowledge and memory. The systematic nature of her killings has erased institutional understanding of how many people have died under suspicious circumstances. New palace staff have no awareness of previous mortality patterns. Fresh guards possess no knowledge of unusual security protocols. Replacement physicians lack familiarity with the symptoms that might have suggested systematic poisoning. The empire she now rules absolutely rests on a foundation of corpses whose deaths appear entirely natural and unconnected. Her subjects believe they're governed by a widow who survived multiple tragedies through strength and wisdom, rather than a mass murderer who created those tragedies to clear her path to power. The transformation from serial killer to beloved Empress represents the ultimate success of sophisticated psychological warfare. Tomorrow, Master Liu will receive his final invitation to tea. Captain Sato will participate in his last training session. Lady Ishikawa will compose her actual final poem. The Empress's murder campaign will end where it began, with poison, accidents, and apparent suicide eliminating the last threats to her reign. The final murders unfold with the precision of clockwork and the beauty of deadly art, each death perfectly timed to appear unconnected while systematically eliminating the last witnesses to the Empress's blood-soaked rise to power. You watch from the shadows as Master Liu arrives at the palace for what he believes is a routine business meeting, but actually represents his appointment with eternity. The morning mist clings to the garden paths like silk shrouds, creating an appropriately ethereal atmosphere for the conclusion of history's most sophisticated assassination campaign. Master Liu enters the private tea house where he's conducted dozens of poison transactions with the Empress over the past 2 years, his leather satchel containing samples of exotic toxins from across the Chinese Empire. He has no idea that today's meeting will demonstrate the effectiveness of his own products, as the Empress has selected his most prized creation, a slow-acting cardiac poison derived from rare mushrooms, to eliminate the man who taught her its proper application. Listen to the gentle ceremony of tea preparation, that meditative ritual that has provided cover for so many murders during her reign. The Empress performs each movement with practiced grace, warming the cups, measuring the leaves, and adding the precise amount of poison that will stop Master Liu's heart in approximately 6 hours, while appearing to be natural cardiac failure brought on by excessive alcohol consumption at advanced age. But the conversation that accompanies their final tea service reveals the true extent of her psychological sophistication. She speaks warmly of their partnership, praising his expertise and expressing gratitude for his contributions to what she describes as necessary political reforms. Master Liu glows with professional pride, unaware that he's receiving both praise and poison from someone who considers his murder just another business transaction requiring proper execution. The poison begins its work within the hour, causing subtle changes in Master Liu's complexion and breathing that the Empress observes with the clinical interest of someone monitoring a chemical experiment. His pulse becomes irregular, his speech slightly surreal, his coordination subtly impaired, all symptoms that will be attributed to his well-known fondness for rice wine, rather than to sophisticated toxicology. By the time he realizes something is wrong, the cardiac damage will be irreversible. Captain Sato's death occurs simultaneously in the palace training grounds, where a sword demonstration becomes an execution when his deliberately weakened blade snaps during practice and drives fragments into his throat. The accident appears to result from metal fatigue in an old weapon, but actually reflects careful sabotage that ensures the break occurs at precisely the right angle to sever his carotid artery. His final words are apologies for his clumsiness, rather than accusations of murder. You can see the Empress's satisfaction as reports of both deaths reach her within hours of each other. The timing isn't coincidental. She's orchestrated these eliminations to occur during the same morning to prevent either victim from learning about the other's death and potentially realizing the pattern. Dead men tell no tales, but living accomplices might develop inconvenient insights about their employer's intentions regarding their own survival. Lady Ishikawa's suicide unfolds in her private chambers that evening, where she's discovered clutching the forged confession that explains her decision to end her life, rather than continue bearing the burden of unnamed sins. The poison that actually kills her mimics the physiological effects of extreme emotional distress, creating physical evidence that supports the narrative of guilt-induced self-destruction. Her death appears to be the tragic end of someone whose conscience finally overwhelmed her capacity for living with terrible secrets. The investigation into these 3 deaths proceeds exactly as the Empress has planned, with each case examined separately by different officials who reach independent conclusions about natural causes, accidents, and suicide. No investigator recognizes that the deaths are connected, much less that they represent the systematic elimination of witnesses to a mass murder campaign. The Empress's compartmentalization of evidence and expertise prevents anyone from seeing the larger pattern. By sunset, the Empress stands alone in her chambers as the sole surviving person who knows the complete truth about her rise to power. Every accomplice has been eliminated, every witness silenced, every piece of evidence destroyed or transformed into something that supports her legitimacy, rather than exposing her guilt. She's not just committed the perfect series of murders, she's erased the very possibility that they could ever be discovered or proven. The winter snow continues falling outside her windows, each flake covering the palace grounds like nature's own burial shroud for the memories of 47 murder victims whose deaths will never be solved, investigated, or even suspected. The Empire sleeps peacefully under a blanket of white, unaware that it's ruled by a woman who has killed her way to absolute power while convincing everyone she deserves it. Her transformation from ambitious court lady to mass-murdering Empress is now complete and undetectable. The Empire awakens to its first morning under the absolute rule of a woman who has murdered her way to power, while convincing her subjects she earned it through wisdom and tragedy. You stand in the Imperial throne room watching the Empress hold her first court session as undisputed ruler, her silk robes shimmering with gold thread as she receives the homage of nobles who have no idea they're bowing to history's most successful serial killer. The winter sunlight streams through paper screens, casting her shadow across marble floors, staining it with the invisible blood of 47 victims. Her voice carries the authority of someone who's removed every possible challenge to her reign, through methods so sophisticated that opposition literally doesn't exist anymore. The courtiers who gather to seek her favour represent the carefully curated survivors of her elimination campaign, individuals selected for their loyalty, ignorance, or usefulness, rather than their competence or nobility. She's not just inherited an empire, she's redesigned its entire power structure through strategic murder. Listen to the rustle of silk and the whisper of respectful conversation as the court conducts business under the watchful eyes of someone who understands that political problems can be solved through careful application of poison, accidents, and apparent suicides. Every policy decision, every appointment, every judicial ruling now flows from the mind of a woman who has proven that violence combined with intelligence can achieve any goal if applied with sufficient patience and sophistication. But the most chilling aspect of her victory is how completely it conceals itself behind legitimacy and public affection. The Empire's subjects believe they're governed by a widow who survived multiple tragedies through strength and wisdom, a ruler who deserves power because she's suffered for it. Her carefully cultivated image as a woman, tested by fate and proven worthy through endurance, has transformed mass murder into a resume qualification for imperial authority. The administrative machinery of government operates smoothly under her direction because she's eliminated every source of potential friction through preemptive assassination. There are no rival factions because she's murdered their leaders. There are no institutional memories of different policies because she's killed everyone who might remember alternative approaches. There are no whispered criticisms because she's systematically eliminated anyone capable of recognizing what she's done. You can see her satisfaction as she reviews reports from across the Empire, each document confirming that her rule faces no challenges, encounters no resistance, and generates no opposition. The political landscape has been scoured clean of threats through methods so effective that peace appears to result from natural harmony rather than artificial elimination of discord. She's created the appearance of consensus by murdering everyone who might disagree. The throne room itself serves as a monument to successful deception, its walls decorated with portraits of rulers who achieved power through inheritance, marriage, or conquest. Conventional method and this your mess of goods that left traces of their origins and opponents who might challenge their legitimacy. The Empress has surpassed all previous rulers by achieving absolute authority through invisible means that leave no evidence, create no martyrs, and generate no surviving opposition to rally around alternative leadership. Her court sessions reveal the psychological sophistication that enabled her murder campaign to succeed so completely. She demonstrates genuine concern for her subjects' welfare, thoughtful consideration of complex problems, and wise judgment in resolving disputes, all qualities that make her appear naturally suited for imperial authority rather than someone who seized it through systematic assassination. The performance is so convincing that even she sometimes seems to believe it. The Empire prospers under her rule, because effective governance turns out to be easier when every potential source of resistance has been eliminated through careful poisoning, strategic accidents, and apparent suicides. Trade flourishes because merchants know their contracts will be honoured. Justice appears fair because no one remains alive to contest her judicial decisions. Military campaigns succeed because generals understand that failure might result in the kind of hunting accident that befell Prince Yamato. The winter court season concludes with ceremonies celebrating the Empire's stability and prosperity under wise imperial guidance, festivals that honour a ruler who appears to have been chosen by fate itself for the responsibilities she bears. The Empress accepts these tributes with appropriate humility, her demeanour suggesting someone grateful for the opportunity to serve rather than someone who murdered 47 people to create that opportunity. But as the last courtiers depart and silence settles over the throne room, you catch a glimpse of her true satisfaction, the quiet contentment of someone who has achieved the impossible by making murder look like natural disaster, regicide appear accidental, and mass assassination seem like tragic coincidence. She chose absolute power over human life. Would you have made the same calculation, or would you have found another path to authority in medieval Japan? The Empress's reign continued for another 37 years, marked by peace, prosperity, and the mysterious absence of any significant opposition. History remembers her as one of Japan's wisest rulers, beloved by her subjects and respected by foreign dignitaries. The true story of how she achieved power died with her victims, leaving behind only the carefully constructed legend of a woman who earned imperial authority through suffering, wisdom, and devotion to her people's welfare. Modern historians still debate whether such perfect governance could have been achieved through conventional means, unaware that they are actually studying the ultimate success of sophisticated political murder, disguised as natural tragedy. The snow continues to fall outside the palace windows as you slowly drift back to the present, leaving behind the silk corridors and shadowed chambers where history's most ruthless empress carved her path to absolute power. Her story reminds us that behind every throne lies a trail of choices, some noble, some necessary, and some that forever stain the hands that reach for ultimate authority. In her world of tea ceremonies and hunting parties, poison and politics, she proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't a sword or an army, but a brilliant mind willing to sacrifice everything human for the cold comfort of absolute control. Sleep well, knowing that in your world, morning will bring coffee instead of conspiracy, and the only thing hunting you is tomorrow's alarm clock. The Empress ruled for 37 years of peace, prosperity, and perfectly concealed murder. History remembers her as wise and beloved. Only the winter wind knows the truth. This ending maintains the sleep storytelling tone while providing proper closure and returning the listener to the present, perfect for drifting off to sleep.